bite-sized video for the Digital Support Services T-Level, where we're going to explore Assignment 3 for the Network Cabling Occupational Specialism, or OS for short. This session has been delivered by myself, Helen Scanlon. I'm part of the provider development team. I'll be taking you through the assessment requirements, regs and conditions, and I'm joined by our digital sector manager, James Lane, who will add his subject specialist knowledge and experience. So hello, James, and thank you for collaborating with me on this bite-sized recording.
Hi, Helen. Thanks for having me. If you've just joined at this point, I bring the technical specialism knowledge here at NCFE. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have as a result of this or any other session, and to add a little bit more context to the specific assignments and tasks that we're covering in this video.
Brilliant, thanks, James. So, okay, let's get started. So this OS assessment consists of 3 task-based assessments and is designed to assess the 3 performance outcomes you can see on the screen now, each of which indicates the knowledge and skills required to enable students to achieve that threshold competence in their chosen occupational specialism. For each performance outcome, there will be a list of knowledge and skills. The knowledge statements identify what the students need to know, and the skills identify what the students need to demonstrate and perform. Some of this content will build upon the core content that was delivered in year 1 of the TQ. We're going to be explaining the 3rd OS assignment in this recording, and we're going to be signposting you to the important documents and information on the NCFE website, the first of which are the key date schedule and the qualification specific instructions for delivery, or the QSID for short. At the end of this recording, we'll share relevant links, including the ones to these 2 documents. So taken from the tutor guides and support documentation, the information we'll provide should help you teachers to understand the requirements for the summative assessment activities for this specialism. There are important factors to consider for these assessments, which you can see on the screen now. For this assignment, please take note of the assessment requirements, and as we progress through the detail of each assessment, we'll highlight any additional conditions that you need to be aware of. So the occupational specialisms are assessed through a series of synoptic assignments, which have been designed to be as occupationally realistic as possible, and these are externally set by NCFE. This slide provides an overview of all the OS assessments for network cabling, along with their allowed timings for each assignment. But this video is going to focus on assignment 3, and the tasks for this are about installing the cabling system. So let's get started. So assignment 3 consists of 3 separate tasks that occur on a fixed date and time specified by NCFE. The dates for each task can be found in the key date schedule, and for the summer 2025 series, you can see the date on the screen now for task 1. You'll notice that this date does not include a set time. Providers may schedule multiple sittings where it isn't manageable for a group of students to complete the tasks at the same time. When this is the case, students must remain under supervised conditions until they have completed all of the tasks so that the confidentiality of the assessment can be maintained. And if students have any access arrangements or reasonable adjustments, such as additional time for the assessment, then providers should apply that internally and increase the task times by the relevant amount. The assessment material should only be available to the students during the scheduled session. So do take account of this and ensure that you've got secure storage areas for students' evidence. So students are going to be working independently under supervised conditions. Internet access is not allowed, and the students will need, again, similar to assignment 2, will need to be provided with a digital camera to capture the evidence of their task completion. This slide also includes some additional information about the photographs the students should take, and the list of resources required for the task is also seen. And this can be found in the tutor guidance on the NCFE website. James, quickly going to come to you, if that's okay, to bring in some subject-specific important points. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I believe we've mentioned this on the other assignments as well. Just to recap, the internet access element is in the spirit of students relying on their existing knowledge. So it's not necessarily meant to stop them accessing something like a word processing document, the word processing document that they might be creating, not a previous word processing document. And also just to call out on, you've already mentioned the provider guide just there. I believe in this assignment, because it's a fault resolution task in here, we give instructions on essentially how to create some faulty cables that the students are going to work on. So if you take your attention to the provider guide as you're planning this, you'll see what we need you to set up. If you have any troubles with that, then I would encourage you to reach out to me, and I can give you some specific support in that if that's of any use.
Lovely, thanks, James. Okay, so the troubleshooting task, it's worth a total of 61 marks. Assignment 3, sorry, is worth a total of 61 marks. And these marks are awarded against the skills and knowledge performance outcomes shown on the screen. Students will have the total of 5 hours and 30 minutes to use information in the assignment brief to carry out the work required and demonstrate their knowledge and skills. There are 25 marks allocated to this first task, and POs 1 and 2 are assessed. And you can see how the marks are allocated to each. James, can I ask you to summarise a typical project brief and activities, please?
Yeah, so I just want to take maybe a quarter step back and just point out that the scenario changes in this assignment. So for assignments 1 and 2, we've been working on the same scenario, but we're shifting focus slightly. So just to cover that very briefly, this is the student has just been hired as a junior network cabler to work at a large company. The roles and responsibilities of their new role include undertaking a range of implementation, monitoring, and testing tasks, as well as ensuring that all work is documented appropriately to meet organizational quality standards and best working practice. So for task 1 that we're looking at now, the first task they've been assigned is to fix several cables that one of the apprentices has incorrectly constructed so they can be reused. The cables have various problems that need troubleshooting before they can be used in a cable installation. And so issues that the student may encounter would include latency, jitter, crosstalk, and poor connections in the cables. So we're looking for the student to test, to figure out what's going on with those cables, to document those faults, implement a fix, and then to document, so in this case, photograph the fixed cables. That's what is a slightly shift of focus versus assignment 1 and 2, but it's one that I think students will get really excited about because it's much more hands-on when they're actually working with those cables and those cables that I mentioned before that you'll need to set up.
Thanks for bringing that to life, James. And as you'll have seen as James was talking there, that there's a summary on the screen now to show you what the students need to produce, and therefore centres will submit to NCFE for marking. Okay, moving on to the second task for this assignment relating to devising a test plan and testing the cabling system. So students have a total of 2 hours to complete this task at a set date and time. And again, the summer 2025 date can be seen on the screen now. These change each year, so please do check the key date schedule we mentioned earlier. So moving on to the assessment requirements, again, internet access isn't allowed, and a summary of what resources are needed is also shown on the screen now. I'm going to check back in with James again, please, for his specialist knowledge here.
Only to highlight that I think we've talked about this before, maybe, that Cisco Packet Tracer is a vendor-specific call-out that we make, and we wouldn't entertain alternatives to that at this point. So it is specifically Packet Tracer that students would need to use on this.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the task in a bit more detail. The marks awarded and how they relate to the performance outcomes can be seen on the screen now. And back to James again for the brief information, please.
Okay, so this is a different task completely to the first one. So we've now got the predecessor was in the process of designing 2 separate interconnected networks for a law firm that is a client of this new organization. Unfortunately, that predecessor has left the company and they were unable to finish the project. So you've been asked by your manager to complete this project by troubleshooting and resolving any issues within the design of the interconnected networks. So we've got a new scenario. Again, it's a nice sort of meaty one for the students to get their teeth into, and we're asking students to write a brief description of how they will analyze, interpret, and solve any issues which arise from that troubleshooting process. Excuse me, and to document that troubleshooting. So again, I want to stress that because it's something that I feel sometimes students are missing out on. Easy to achieve marks as long as they understand what we're actually asking. So again, I'm going to reiterate, please do have the students look through the SAMs, get used to this type of task, and it's that logical flow of sort of breaking down those barriers and figuring out what's going on. That's what we're really trying to draw out on this task.
Lovely, thank you. And as we've done earlier, you can see on the screen what evidence requirements there are for this task too. Okay, the final task for this assignment is task 3. The students have a total of 2 hours to complete this task, again at a set date and time. And again, the summer 2025 date can be seen on the screen now. And as I said earlier, these do change each year, so please do check the up-to-date key date schedule. Moving on to the assessment requirements, again, internet access isn't allowed, and there's a quick summary of the resources needed. And final time for the check-in. James, specialist knowledge on what the students will need to be provided with here, please.
So it's still a scenario based, but we're shifting the scenario. So I won't get ahead of myself because I think we'll cover it on the next slide. But the specialist requirement here is coming from the student. So I don't think there's anything that teaching staff need to be particularly focused on at this point.
Great, thank you. That makes sense. Okay, the marks awarded can be shown on the screen now and how they relate to the performance outcomes. And I'm just going to bring up the brief information and evidence requirement for this last one, please, James.
Yep. So we've got the same law firm in task 2 has now implemented what the student has come up with as in the way of the interconnected network design. And the student's now been asked to perform a risk assessment on both the Newcastle and the London sites. So the manager has provided some additional information, which of course the student will be made aware of, based on some information gathering sessions. And I think there's a key point here that I'd like to stress is the law firm has a large budget to pay for any changes that they recommend as a result of risk assessments. Now, this certainly isn't to suggest that the student should just go full speed ahead and just suggest anything, but what we're saying is don't let the finances be the barrier. So we really want to just allow them to flex their technical muscles and say, do you know what, these are good practice, these are gold standard, this is what you should be thinking of, and we're just taking money off the table as to say, well, let's just assume that's not a concern. So thinking about what those possible threats might look like, any kind of vulnerabilities that they can highlight, thinking about the assets that are specifically at risk, particularly given it's a law firm in this scenario, what the likelihood is, the overall risk, and then really important is, of course, what their recommended actions would look like, and how or what their proposal for mitigation look like. So we're giving them, like I say, we're giving them the opportunity to sort of flex those muscles and just really to get into this and hopefully have some fun with it. It's a really interesting task, as all these are. But the prep for these students is to think specifically about how, like, going through the troubleshooting task and thinking about what the issues might be and how it applies to this scenario. So again, in this case, I'm going to highlight it's a law firm, so there's some easy wins in there.
Nice. So it's applying their knowledge of risk assessments and the subject area with no limitations in relate to finance. So I love that. Gold standard.
Exactly.
What's the best possible thing you should do?
100%. Yeah.
Brilliant. Love that. Okay, so this slide shows the section of the website where you'll find these sample and support assessment materials. This includes specimen assignment briefs, guide standard exemplification materials. These include sample student assignments showing what a pass and a distinction looks like for each of the assignments. And you'll also find the previous live assessments and mark schemes and chief examiner reports, really useful documents. And we've also included links to the current QSID and the key date schedule, which can also be found on the NCFE website. And then James, before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Only, as always, just to parrot that, really, the SAMs are there for students to access, and you've already mentioned chief examiners reports. So, just think about this logically. This what we've got available to you here is essentially the report from the chief examiner telling you where students have got some
Missed
grades from
opportunity.
Missed opportunities. Yeah. So you can read through that, and it literally says this, students are not mentioning this and not mentioning that. That's what we're looking for. We will always do our best to try and find marks for the students, but if they haven't said what we need them to say, then it sometimes is a struggle. And I suppose to use that that old educational adage is, show you're working out. That's where we can find a lot of the marks. And I think we've alluded to this in previous videos we've made about other assignments. It's not always as simple as saying whether there is a right or a wrong answer. I would suggest that the student focus more of their effort in explaining why or how they've arrived at that answer, because that rationale is the meaty part, and that's where the mark's going to be. So getting them used to that approach will not only set them up for success in something like an OSA, the Occupational Specialist Assessment, but we have to remember that some of these students will go straight on for employment, and this is going to set them up for success in employment as well, because that's exactly what we'd look for in the sector, is having them bring that insight into the field and having them explain why they think that. So that's
not
really
just the
attractive.
how, it's the why as well is really important.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Lovely, thank you. Okay, we've reached the end of this bite-sized recording. We hope it has provided a better understanding of assignment 3. Please do with us see the other bite-sized videos that form the part of this occupational specialism series, and there's a QR code on the screen now for you to leave some feedback on how useful you found it. Okay, thank you so much and goodbye.